How's it going, guys? Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have not subscribed to my channel already, please make sure you do. Today I want to talk to you guys about ice fishing. Something I have only recently got into, probably within the last 3 years or so. Obviously it's cold, it's wintertime out here, and the ice is probably right now between 4 to 6 inches thick. Which is safe to stand on, but I usually wait until it's a little bit thicker, just because I like to fish out in the main lake, which usually freezes last. This video is directed at some of the more beginner anglers, some of the people that maybe haven't done it a whole lot, or maybe just want to get into ice fishing. And I'm just going to run down some of the basic things that I think are important to get when you're getting started ice fishing. So first off, what do you need to start catching fish? Well, one thing that I don't have laid out here, just because it's a size consideration, is an ice auger. You need to make a hole in the ice before you pull fish out of the ice, right? There's basically two types. There are the hand augers, which you basically put on the ice and just crank into the ice. And then there's the powered augers, which obviously just cut right through. Considerations for each: hand augers are a lot cheaper. As long as the blades are properly sharpened, they're actually very good for cutting anywhere under probably a foot of ice. They actually work pretty well, but if you want to punch a lot of holes, it's definitely not the best option. I only really use it if I know exactly where I'm going, and I'm only putting probably 4 or 5 holes in the ice. Power augers are expensive, but I think they're super handy to have for pretty much any ice fishing application. It makes the process so much easier. The only consideration as far as bringing them out on the ice is they're a lot heavier, so it's a little harder to transport them, and also, you need gas. You need to make sure that they're full and they're in good working order. I'm not a big guru on ice augers. I don't know a whole lot about the ins and outs of them, so I'm not going to recommend anything particular, but do your research on those because it will be needed for ice fishing. Next up, once I get the hole in the ice, how do I catch the fish? Most people nowadays are going to be using something similar to this. It's basically just a rod and reel. And the way we fish differs a little bit from what a lot of people do. A lot of people will sit in the ice and jig a single lure, like this little blade bait here, or a little jig and grub, something of the sort. We don't really do that. The reason is the fish are generally, one, very aggressive where I fish, and two, they generally school up a lot, but they move around. Since I don't have a flasher, I need ways to increase my chances of catching fish, where having a single jigging lure doesn't always produce the best. What we do is we actually attach pretty heavy spoons to our rods. I'll show you this up close. I don't know if the camera will focus on it or not, but it's a pretty heavy spoon, as you can see too by the bend in my rod. And up above it, we actually use fly fishing flies, which I have a bunch of here. They're sparkly, they're fuzzy, they give off a lot of attractive qualities to the perch, which is what I fish for mainly. And then the advantage of this spoon is that when you drop it down, these don't go straight down, they actually curve out to the sides. And where we fish, we usually fish in water that's about 15 to 20 feet deep. This spoon will bring your bait in probably a 6 to 8 foot circle around where your actual hole is, so you're able to cover a larger area with just one hole being cut. For this particular strategy, we always tip both of our baits in spikes, which are basically little maggots. You can find them at most gas stations, and if not, you can find them at local tackle shops or outdoor supply stores. You just hook 1 or 2 or 3 of them on your hooks and drop them down. Make sure you keep them fresh. So there's one consideration for something you can use to get started. This rod and reel cost me like $20 total, and it's really not bad. It's a little soft, but it's performed really well for me. Basically, you don't need to go super expensive, especially if you're getting into this. There's plenty of ice fishing rods for really not too much money. And in terms of what reel you use, generally I'd recommend a reel designed for ice fishing because it's made to mitigate some of the problems caused with ice forming up in the reel. But I've also used just normal type spinning reels, and they've worked alright as well. In terms of what line, this is where I really want to stress. Using regular fishing line for this probably won't work too well, and the reason is fishing line does weird things when it gets really cold. Monofilament, I've found, tends to soak up some water and kind of get really kinky as well, and fluorocarbon gets very brittle. So that's why I do recommend getting ice fishing specific line. I usually use 4-pound test. That works fine for most of my applications. Another question I had when I first got started in ice fishing: do you need one of these little things? There's a bunch of different types of these. It's called a spring bobber. Basically, it's a super sensitive extension of your rod. It doesn't make a huge difference for me in my type of fishing, but for some people it might be huge. I would do your own research on that because personally I don't use these too much. Another way you can catch fish is with this little guy, tip up. These are really cool. Basically, there's a bunch of different styles of these, but this is one of the less expensive styles. It's generally quite cheap. You can get these made out of wood or cheap plastic components like this, and honestly it'll probably work fine. Now I haven't used this a whole lot, so I'm kind of struggling here. You use these two legs and it forms kind of an X. That sits down in the hole. You've got your line reeled on here, and the tip-up line is different than regular fishing line. It's very similar to braided line. It's usually pretty thick. This is 20-pound test stuff. Usually you use live bait down in the water, however deep you want it to go. This little guy goes up in the air. You bend it over. I don't use them so much, but what basically happens is when the fish starts running, it pulls line from the spool, which in turn basically allows this to move and releases the flag. So you'll see a flag up in the air, you'll know a fish pulled the line out. You go over to the tip up, pull it out of the water, grab the line, and hand line the fish out of the water. It's kind of interesting, usually used for predator fish such as pike, but people have caught all kinds of fish on these. I personally haven't used them a whole lot, but I will probably be using these a little bit more this year, so stay tuned for that. One thing I think is really important is to make sure you have something to scoop the ice out. The holes are going to freeze up if it's below freezing, which it is going to be most of the time when you're ice fishing. So they make one specifically for it. This one's metal. They also make ones that are plastic that are super cheap, and honestly they work fine. Go ahead and buy those if you want. Also, I've seen people use cooking utensils like little ladles with holes in them like this. Same concept, just something to scoop the ice out of the water. But do make sure you have this because it's really annoying to have to keep kicking it with your foot. You don't want to be wiggling your rod tip in the ice to break it up for hopefully obvious reasons. So pick up something for this purpose. Another thing that's not necessary but I would highly recommend is some sort of ice spike. It's a safety thing. There's really not many good reasons why you wouldn't have these. Now I don't wear them all the time, to be honest, but it is really useful. Keeps you from getting injured on the ice, slipping and falling, which we really don't want to happen. So if you can, try to get some of these to put on your boots. Another question I had when I was starting out ice fishing is, do I need some sort of ice shanty? And the answer to that is no, you don't. Most of the ice fishing that I have done will punch a bunch of holes in the line on the lake and move along the holes until we find our fish schools. I don't have a flasher, which is something you can drop down in the water and see what's going on. It's kind of like a fish finder or a sonar unit that you see people using on their regular boats. I don't have that, so moving around is the best way to find the fish. However, I will say these can be very useful. And this one packs into basically what you can wear is a backpack. It's a 6-foot square floor, and it's a little bit less than 6 feet high. No insulation, nothing. Pretty basic, but good quality materials. This cost me $130. It's not super expensive, and honestly for what I've been doing, this is more than adequate. It's especially helpful if it's really windy out. You can set this thing up, stake it into the ground, and it blocks out a lot of that wind. And because this particular one is black, it actually absorbs a lot of the light on like a sunny day. Helps keep it really warm. Very nice. If you're looking into getting a nice shanty, don't go for the most expensive, giant floored insulated ones. Find something under $200 with a decent sized floor space, and it will suit you fine for most applications. Obviously, depending, I don't know about what everyone's situation is, but for me, I would be more than confident bringing this shanty anywhere in Vermont and going ice fishing. I think it'll work just fine. So with all that being said, guys, This is just a really basic rundown of some of the things that I wish I had known when I started ice fishing, some of the things I had to kind of figure out along the way, picking and choosing, trying to put together a puzzle. So I tried to put all the most important pieces together in one little section. So if you watch this all the way through, thank you very much. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. We will be ice fishing very soon. If you are interested in ice fishing, subscribe to my channel, turn on post notifications, and stay tuned for when I hit the ice this year. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.